very rich discussion, listening to all the speakers. But let me start off really with, the definition uh, that I did here on startups, which is groups that use digital technology to solve social issues. Let me recast that because maybe we've gone too quickly to startups. It's really about using the fourth industrial revolution to deliver productivity, productivity improvements, to business in Africa, and also to provide services. I don't want to say social services, but services to the base of the pyramid, harnessing the efficiency of technology. The point here is I want to connect it with what Professor Orama mentioned. The risk, the risk adjusted returns of all of these opportunities is actually attractive. It's not an altruistic venture. The idea is really to use technology to increase profitability through efficiency. So you're delivering a value for which, all segments of society are actually paying for. So this is really from a business perspective. However, because we're talking about digital technology, a lot of us here are a little bit above the median age of 35, okay? And so we're not as technology adaptable as the young people. And this is really where the youth demographic essentially is the one that is technology savvy and hence are the ones that are going to disrupt. And that's why it now becomes a conversation around startups, okay? Now, if you take a look even at the various segments of tech-enabled. It was great to hear about telemedicine. Now, one of the reasons telemedicine is, very interesting is because it's able to actually provide services in a scalable manner, especially to people at the base of the pyramid, but also to people that are middle income and also to people who are also wealthy. But once again, I think as I heard you talk about global partnerships, what I realized is that you could use some of the lessons in Brazil to actually create similar opportunities, in Africa. And this also brings up another point. In other words, why is Japan interested in startups in Africa? Because some of these models can actually be ultimately exported to the rest of the world. It's not just useful in Africa. Africa can be the learning ground, the testing point. But once again, I think the overriding point that we should keep in mind is it's not about altruism. It's really about new ideas that can ultimately be used in multiple markets. Now, Shibusawa-san talked about investing in Africa being forward-looking, and it's not really about the decrease in population in Japan versus the increase in population in Africa or just the youth demographic. It's also about scaling up, this youth demographic. And so if you take a look at, for example, Kenya and Nigeria, in Kenya, we have what we call Silicon Savannah. So we are creating the ecosystems to actually, provide opportunity for these youth entrepreneurs. In the case of Nigeria, it's called, the Yaba area, okay? And so this is also creating, global opportunities, that are first developed in Africa, okay, and then, can be exported. Now, is Africa far away? That's the point you made. And one of the reasons that we're partnering with the Kezai Doyukai as the African Development Bank is to make Africa as close as possible, for you, between ourselves and ourselves being the African Development Bank and the Kezai Doyukai. Yes, we're looking at the co-creation on Ant Capital, but it goes beyond Ant Capital. We want to, through this as a start, we want to be able to even support the members of the Kezai do Yukai who want to actually enter Africa. The Ant Capital is the first example, but once again, we encourage you to be limited partners to Ant Capital because we are also going to invest as limited partners. But it's just the start of really a bigger relationship. So we want you to keep that in mind. It was interesting also listening to Toyota Tusho because you already know Africa quite well. And we definitely would like you to be the poster child for the great opportunities in Africa. So it was good to see that you've gone from the initial joint ventures approach where you acquired Unitrans, a pharmaceutical company, CFAO, to actually get the market knowledge and market experience on an expedited basis. But now you're also looking at startups. And I think that's really, ultimately the confirmation that today's startups are tomorrow's, big companies, as Shibusawa-san mentioned. And we're even seeing that in the case of fintechs in Africa. We have a number of unicorns in Africa, InterSwitch, Flutterwave, Paystack, and several other companies. And so, these companies may be startups, but, once again, they can achieve scale very quickly and can be very profitable, opportunities.
Okay, thank you very much for your comment. And I have a question for you. So how it's very important one, I think. So how can African Development Bank work or support to encourage Japanese companies' investment in African startups?
I mean, so we're looking at things from an ecosystem perspective, and that's where we come as the African Development Bank. First of all, Shibusawa-san talked about human capital. You've got to develop that human capital. So we have a lot of training programs in partnership with the likes of, Microsoft, Google, and Intel's. We have what we call coding for employment. So we're looking to develop, that youth capacity in Africa. And we as the AFDB really focus on the training, from a technology perspective, but also from an entrepreneurship, perspective. The second is what I just talked about, co-creating Ant Capital with the Kezai do Yukai, begins to actually provide insights to the Kezai do Yukai companies about the opportunities in Africa. But we go further. We are rolling out what we call the Youth Entrepreneurship Investment Banks, as the AFDB. And ultimately, this is to create the pipeline of tech-enabled companies for the venture capital firms, such as Ant Capital, such as Uncovered that already has investments in 29 companies, startup companies, such as, AIIC as well. So we're looking to create, what I call a value chain, that would really support, startups. So that's the way, we in the African Development Bank, look to support. But we also try to understand the perception of risks, by Japanese companies and think through how we can help resolve those risks. Okay, so some of it, for example, I think the first speaker talked about, regulatory changes, political conditions changes, but these are, areas that we look to address through our engagement with regional member countries. We look to address, the policy uncertainty and also the regulatory environment. And then we also provide political, risk mitigation in terms of advice, but we can also provide some guarantee products, that support that.
Okay, thank you very much. And I have the one request. So just beyond the startup. So I'd like to introduce our discussion in Nairobi 2 weeks ago. So at that time, I told you Japanese companies are now looking for highly skilled IT talent in India. And you mentioned Africa is ready for providing such excellent IT talent for Japanese companies. So please tell us the detail.
No, so it goes back to some of the other points I made. We have a program with Intel's, Intel, for example, to train, I think, 9 million Africans in terms of artificial intelligence. We have the Coding for Employment program, where we intend to really, train 25, I think 50, up to 50 million youth in terms of coding skills. So what we're doing is we're training and equipping the human capital, and that human capital would have, enough knowledge to be exportable to the rest of the world. So this is, I mean, for us, when we think about the fourth industrial revolution, when we think about our youth demographic, and the fact that we're equipping our youth demographic, ultimately they're going to be globally skilled and hence can be hired, similar to the efforts you're making in India and in other markets.